Welcome to CREGG. Today, August 25th. I hope everyone's been enjoying their summer and are gearing up, getting focused for the end of the year, finish up strong. Today, we are super excited to welcome Mabell Garcia Paine from Veritas Consulting. Marika will give some of her credentials. I'm Carolyn Shima. I am in sales and marketing for Green Economy. I am stepping in for Stephanie Zapalak, our usual co-host, who is unable to be here with us today. And I would love to introduce Marika Erdely, the owner, founder of Green Economy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to have a really great session today and really kind of think out of the box of where California is going. And we're really excited to have our friend, Mabell, join us today. She's got a great level of experience and very unique for our sustainability industry of what's really happening in the state, where she's helping working with utilities and new products and things. So Mabell, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to introduce my friend Mabell.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name, as Marika mentioned, is Mabell. I'm a native Angelino, born and raised in LA. As educational background, went to Cal State Northridge, currently attending USC as part of my master's program. I'm doing, it's called Masters of Science in Entrepreneurship and Innovation. But really, my career has been dedicated in California's energy industry, 25 years. Sometime working for a utility, Southern California Gas Company, but the majority of my background has been working for large implementation companies that they bid on large contracts, energy efficiency contracts for the most part, to run on behalf of the utility, and then they engage with customers to help identify what are those energy reduction investments, equipment investments that then qualify for incentives. And these companies then help end customers apply for those incentives and then help you with those projects. So about 2.5 years ago, I launched my company. As you can see here, here's just a quick background. For those of you who are familiar with Latin, Veritas means green in Latin. And so Veritas Consulting was born. And my main target is utilities, airports, local agencies, local governments and state agencies, helping them with areas such as program strategy and design, mostly like incentive programs, business and market development, technology feasibility, what are good technologies that help support our future goals in energy reduction and decarbonization, which we'll talk about soon. And then this thing that I called innovation management. How do we bring in innovation to accelerate these changes that we're looking to make?
Awesome. Love it.
All right, so should I just jump in?
Yeah, just go ahead and jump in.
Okay, so today's call is on incentives and California's incentives that support the state's energy goals. And so really there's two buckets of incentives that we'll be talking about. One of them is energy reduction incentives that most of you are familiar with because they've been around since the 70s. But then there's this new crop of incentives and programs that are focused on decarbonization. So one of the goals of today's call is to help you kind of see the difference between energy reduction or kWh and therm savings and decarbonization or reduction of carbon. And what does that mean? So I'll start here with why does this matter? So greenhouse gases have been identified as creating an increase in the Earth's temperature because of all these greenhouse gases that are being emitted from civilization, us living our day-to-day lives. And there are 5 different greenhouse gases. Carbon is one that is being identified as that emits from buildings. And so what this graph shows is that about 24% of greenhouse gases in California come from buildings, either residential or commercial. Now, they're second in terms of emitters, because there you see the transportation is 41%. But today's presentation is going to focus on California's strategies to reduce carbon from buildings. And so you see there 24% is the goal. It is the the amount. And then the next slide, which we'll go into next, shows that what the state is projecting in terms of, if we use 1990 as a baseline year. So 1990 was picked because it's there's a lot of good data about buildings and greenhouse gas emissions and the way that buildings operate back in 1990 and today. And if we use that as our baseline, how much do we need to reduce between now and 2045 to get us back to 1990 levels? And in the next 4 years, as you could see there, we're looking for a 20% reduction. Then we need to double it by another 20% by 2030. And then a very accelerated increase between 2030 and 2045 to get to that 100% reduction goal.
That, I have to say, it doesn't even seem possible. I mean, that is a huge drop in 19 years to be gone, to have it all gone, to not have any gap, no carbon coming out of the building sector in basically 19 years, right?
Right.
So how is that going to be done? I guess is the big question, right? How are we going to do that?
Yeah. And, if from a state perspective, if the challenge is unemployment, if the challenge is economic development, if the challenge is energy policy and meeting goals, all states have a toolbox made up of carrots and sticks, as we say. And so to get to this goal on this, when it comes to this subject, it's a combination of both. And what we like to say is that the sticks are laws, so Title 24, new building code standards, you must do this. And so when the state says you must do this, you can consider that a stick, but that is behind some of these goals, because you need to have an idea of how you get somewhere and what are the strategies to get there. So those are the sticks. Today's presentation is more on the carrots. So what can you present to building owners and operators and the consultants that influence decisions to incentivize and motivate building owners to do this themselves? And so money is a great motivator, and that's what today's presentation will be about.
Yeah, free money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide.
We love free money.
So on the left, you see what the state has identified as all the ways that greenhouse or carbon specifically can be reduced from activity that happens in our state. And so of those 7, there are 2 that are in the darker blue that are strategies that the utilities have to handle themselves. But as you can see, there are 5 where those strategies are really employed at the building level. And if you were to look at what are ways to reduce carbon in a building, here are the 5 different ways. And then on the right, what I listed was just a partial list of the energy efficiency, but also decarbonization programs, incentive programs that either already exist or have been significantly revamped, or new ones that are meeting those different goals. And so you see the arrows that align that. And the 3 that are highlighted are the ones that we're going to go through today.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, perfect. Interesting.
Next slide. All right, so we'll get right into it. So for those of you who are in the business of new construction, it's important for you to be aware of this program. This industry, I'm sure like your industry, loves acronyms. So the acronym of this program is called BUILD. And as you can see by the name, Building Initiative for Low Emissions Development. So low carbon emissions, again, back to a program that is specifically about reducing carbon. And what you need to be aware of is that the program is being run by the California Energy Commission. You can go to their website, which is the link listed there. You can get on their list so that you can know when the program will be launched. It hasn't launched yet. You see there, it says December 2021. They're coming towards the end of an RFP process to hire somebody to run it for them. And so there's not much information, but of the information that exists, you'll see it in the next, this slide and 2 other slides.
So is this based on like the old Savings by Design, where they had to reach a certain amount of energy efficiency, or this is just no gas at all, and so they're going to get money to build at no gas?
Right. This is all electric.
All electric. So $80 million is a lot, really, over 4 years. That's a lot of money out there for anyone building either single family housing or any of this type of residential housing.
Yes. At the same time, it needs to be spread across the whole state.
Right.
And as you look at that, the slide where we showed like the progression of percentage of reduction of greenhouse of carbon that needs to happen by 2045. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So in a way, this is like a deposit or maybe an initial
Progress payment.
investment. Yeah, the state needs to significantly increase the amount of money that they spend. This is just for the next 4 years that aligns with the first 20% reduction, but there's a long way to go and more money. They're keep looking creatively. What they want to do is just for those of you who are curious, this proof of concept to the financial markets that there is money here for them to then come in, because the state isn't a forever, bank account of more taxes, essentially, because this all comes from taxes, to fund the amount of money needed for those reductions, but rather can they tempt the financial markets to come in and use private money? And so this, in a way, are 4 years of like proof of concept to then bring in external money.
Interesting. Yeah, that's great. Okay.
So then the next slide goes into, let's see. Okay. So one of the items that we wanted you to come away with is if at the office or at a dinner party, if anybody ever asks about energy, like what is the difference between energy reduction and carbon reduction? We wanted you to be to have that in the back of your pocket, essentially. And so energy reduction is about energy reduction at any time of day. So the incentives that have existed this whole time just show, if you currently use X amount of energy and then you buy a piece of equipment that reduces your energy, you'll get an incentive off the difference. That is not as important, because if you know that between 11 a.m. to like 3 p.m., the amount of energy that the state has is more. We have more supply than demand. And this comes from all these great contracts on the solar side. So reducing energy during the middle of the day isn't that important, honestly. But the huge problem is the energy that is being used between 4 and 9 p.m. And as you could think about like your normal workday, between 4 to about maybe 8, the buildings that you would have come from pre-COVID are still operating. They're still using energy. And now residential homes are now being powered up because people are coming home. So between residential buildings and commercial buildings, the amount of energy that is needed between 4 to 9 is at hitting the maximum capacity that electric utilities distribution systems can handle. And they can't rely on solar. Instead, the big difference is, and so between 4 to 9, the energy that they use is from gas power plants. So gas power plants, if you have to crank them up, emit so much more, or they emit carbon, unlike solar during the middle of the day. So the goal is, if we want to reduce carbon, let's not crank up or reduce the amount of gas that we have to crank up between 4 to 9. And demand response is a tactic that allows for that. So can you pre-cool your building, let's say at between noon to 3, get it really cold, because there's all this extra abundance of energy, so that between 4 to 9, you can maybe just have the fan running. And then you can kind of like slide your way into, maybe you have to use the air conditioner, but later than you would have. And so that's essentially demand response, this idea of like shifting load. And that's the big difference between energy reduction and decarbonization. So can we reduce the amount of energy usage between 4 to 9, or shift it so that we're not cranking up the gas plants in the back by the utilities?
Yeah, that makes sense. And so all those gas, once you're using that electricity, you're using electricity, but it's actually being funded at this point by, or fueled by those gas heating, what we were calling them, But the thing that also, it's the most expensive time of day too, right? So from 4 to 9 p.m., you're also paying more. So there is a cost benefit. So there is a carbon reduction, but then there's also cost benefit balance that's going to really help your bottom line if you aren't using energy at 4 to 9, right? That load shifting is super key for that.
Exactly. And so for those of you who have buildings in municipal electric utilities, peak demand spikes in costs haven't happened yet, but it's only because they're slower. I mean, they have the same issues as the investor-owned utilities. The investor-owned utilities have just gotten faster to charging you all more between that 4 to 9 period.
Do you think LADWP is going to shift to 4 to 9? Because right now they're from 1 to 5. Are they shifting as everyone else has?
Yes. Yeah.
I figured.
Yeah, they have the same problems. They're trying to, that's the stick in a way. They're trying to hit you at the pocketbook. And so what do? You're going to be forced to use less. But there's technologies out there, again, demand response, that you don't have to be uncomfortable. You don't have to reduce the productivity of your business if you start talking to more demand response experts and understand what is and it's always a customized plan to your business, and ensuring that the productivity and output level stays the same.
Well, also you like controls, like, right, having
Sure.
controls that you can program them so you are cooling till 3 p.m., right? And at 3 p.m. you turn it off, or you raise the temperature so it's not cooling as much, and therefore so that is technology, right? Technology helps.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a way, set it and forget it, right? Program those controls in a way that you don't have to worry about it every single day.
Right.
Okay, next slide. So we had talked about the $80 million across 4 years, and because it needs to be allocated across the state to ensure that there isn't one part of the state that is cannibalizing another part of the state's funding, and certain customers end up losing out. There is these preset sub-allocations by region. And if you take a look at the column that says incentive amount, that's really the one that you care about the most. And you see how it's being planned to be divided across the whole state. Again, this is directional because the program hasn't launched yet. It'll launch in December, but this gives you an idea of what to expect. And then they also, again, back to the carrot analogy, they want to motivate building owners to invest in certain technologies that further help with decarbonization and further help, honestly, to ensure the stability of the distribution system. And here are some of those examples.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to go into program number 2. So I imagine many of you are aware of the Savings by Design program. This was a program that the 4 investor-owned utilities ran, some of them in partnership with the muni electric utilities. And this was all to motivate new construction to be built above Title 24 code. And so again, the carrot will give you money if you invest in these additional high efficiency improvements or design improvements. The utilities were forced by their boss is the California Public Utilities Commission, to go out to bid. The commission said 4 programs with the same name, but when you dig into the details, they're all different, isn't beneficial for residents of our state. So utilities, you must go out to bid, find one implementer, and the program must be the same across the whole state. And so the utilities just went through a solicitation process. They hired a company called Willdan, as you see up at the top, and they launched this program, formerly known as Savings by Design, now called the California Energy Design Assistance, CEDA. And the main thing you should know is that it's for new construction. Here you could see, I just pulled out the non-residential building types, but it's all commercial, public, industrial, ag, and high-rise multifamily. High-rise multifamily falls in the bucket of non-residential. And then the services are more than what the Savings by Design program offered. So a customized energy model, assistance identifying and evaluating energy saving measures, analysis of energy costs, financial incentives, and mechanical system component analysis. And then there is a sub-program if you want to build all electric. There's additional motivators there. And then, but if you still want to build a mixed fuel building, there are certain incentives for that and certain parameters. So in a way, there's like this two subsets with this all electric with more money, because that's where the state wants to go. And the big deal, as always, is that the to qualify, you must bring in the program at the design stage so that you can identify together the maximum energy reduction potential and practices in that building that will maximize or reduce the amount of carbon that comes out of that building.
Yeah, and we had done a savings by design program for a hotel, and it was really interesting to see how just the change in analysis of the change of different types of HVAC equipment and the different levels of SEER, so the efficiency levels of that equipment, and how much more efficient the operation and lower cost the operation of the hotel was going to be, because they would have a higher efficiency unit, especially if you're going to hold the building. You can do a life cycle cost, which I'm sure is involved here with the analysis of energy costs and paybacks, where, yeah, you might pay a little bit more up front, but now you're getting for that higher efficient equipment, but now you're also getting an incentive. But now as you operate the property and as you sell it, let's say you want to sell it, even the fact that it's super efficient is going to be worth more, right? Your NOI is going to be higher. So it's kind of I think it's a great program. I'm super excited that they just came out with it. I've been waiting patiently. And I know I think it just came out last week, actually. So it's relatively new, but I think it's a great for anybody building new buildings. Like, why not go after this and get some money, but also, push the envelope.
Right. And for those of you who work with building owners, could you use to enhance your value to your customer, to your client, by saying, I'm bringing in this third party. They're being paid by the utilities, and they're looking at the long-term investment, as you mentioned, Marika. They're also looking at greenhouse gas reduction. So they have different state objectives, but these services are free, and they could complement the analysis and the designs that you're doing and the calculations that you're doing, so that the customer can then see two different perspectives, and how these, let's say, this bundle of measures can also meet the state objectives, and then you can capture more of that in those incentives that are available.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, next one. All right, this is the third and last program that we're going to highlight here. So when it comes to non-residential customers, there is the SelfGeneration Incentive Program, aka a battery program, essentially. It also exists for residential, but we're just focusing in this presentation non-residential. And you'll see there's three scaled incentive rates. So at the minimum, you can apply and get $350 a kilowatt hour, which covers about 35% of a battery. They did an analysis of market costs, and that's where they came up with. But the two stars and the two columns down at the bottom are the most important, because first of all, the increase in incentives are just so jarring, right? So you go from $350 to $850 or $1,000. So let's talk about the difference. So the $850 is for specific buildings, government agency buildings, schools, nonprofits, even small businesses, but they need to be located in disadvantaged communities. There's a map that show where these DACs are, another acronym. So it's easy enough to tell. It's not a subjective thing. It needs to be in a certain type of zip codes. And so you can apply and get this enhanced incentive. Now, if that building that is going to be, if that building, is in a disadvantaged community and is being affected by wildfires, so they've had 2 or more public safety power shutoff events, or they're in a fire threat district that everybody's worried that there will be a fire one day, then the incentive goes up to 1,000, because the idea there is that the building should be available to operate on its own without any need or dependency on the distribution system because the power may go out, right? And they may have essential services to offer the community, and they need to be completely in full operation as would normally be expected, so that they can support the community around there. So you see there the buildings in particular, and even there, grocery stores or supermarkets that are of a certain size.
That's
So
amazing.
very important also to highlight for you.
So does this program require you have a solar PV system or not? Or you could still have a battery without a solar PV system, correct?
Yes, you can still just have it just is for the battery. There is no pre-requirement. I think that's your question, right? No pre-requirement to have solar. Yeah.
And if you were to just have a battery, how would you fill it up? You'd fill it up at night when costs are low.
Yes. Right.
And then you could deploy it during that period of demand response we talked about from 4 to 9. If you really wanted to cool your building, you could pull from this battery.
Exactly. Even as buildings are moving towards converting from gas water heating to electric, what's really interesting is that SGIP recently allowed the purchase of electric heat pump water heaters. It's now an eligible measure, because the idea is that water heater can serve as a type of battery. So it also is eligible for this incentive.
Yeah, and the resilience, I mean, to me, that's that issue, or really where you really need something to operate when everything's crashing, right? You still, the medical facility still has common area lighting or air conditioning or whatever, it still can operate, right? I remember when there were those hurricanes in New York and the hospitals just, the generators didn't work, right? They stopped. Whereas here, if you had battery storage, you at least know certain loads within the building could still operate, right? There's that resilience of keeping things going.
Right. I mean, honestly, this concept of the public safety power shutoff is not going to go away anytime soon. There's just too many millions of miles of above ground power lines that are just with high winds, right? There will always be a continued risk of fires, and so since we expect this to go on for a pretty long time, what can we do to protect the key buildings in communities so that they continue to stay in operation?
Right. And my understanding is if you get a solar PV system installed and you do the battery at the same time, you can get the 26% federal tax credit on both of those items. So
right.
That's nice. Great. That's interesting.
That's the end of the presentation.
All right, great. So basically, to me, this tells me there's a lot of money out there, and we just tapped 3 of the programs that are related to new construction for multifamily, new construction for everything, and batteries. And that's just a tip of the iceberg, and that's just right now, right?
Right.
It's just starting.
Now, the background behind that is that there are easily 3 other decarbonization incentive programs that I'm aware of that exist and are about to launch, but they're on the residential side. And the reason is, even though based on that original pie chart from one of the early slides, is that you see about the even amount of percentage of carbon being reduced both from res and from commercial. On the residential side, the technologies to reduce carbon, so the electric technologies, are more commercially viable and available than on the commercial side. So the policymakers are saying, these electric heat pump water heaters, gas stove tops, induction stove tops are available. There is a whole slew of electric appliances that exist out in commercially viable more readily on the residential side. So let's throw money at that. But it's a slower pathway forward on the commercial side. So that's why there's more of a focus on new construction and on batteries, as you can see there.
That's interesting. Yeah, so any new home builder should be focused on that because they could get all this money, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I know when I worked for a home builder for a while and there was none of this, right? There was no discussion about this at all. So I'm so glad that this is coming about, pushing the envelope. All right, do we have some questions? Anyone have some questions?
Yeah, so it looks like we have a question. Can you comment on how much carbon is released in the demolition process?
Yes, so the calculations are flowing. And in fact, I saw another chart last night as I was looking at like what are the carbon emissions from buildings. Another more recent chart showed that the emissions were higher than the 12% that this chart said. So there's what are the emissions emitted by the operations, but what are the emissions at the construction, and then to your point, the carbon emissions that come from the demolition process. So I guess demolition can happen at the beginning or the end. The numbers, I guess, depend on the building itself, but they're embedded in those numbers because it is a combination of both operating and embedded carbon.
Right, which is what we've been focusing on more as operational carbon, right? Which happens when you're operating a building.
Yeah, on the environmental side, that's where they're paying more attention to, like, how do we reuse construction material? Because if there was X amount of carbon emitted in creating that construction material, why throw that away and create more impact on landfills? Is there a way to reuse that? And so there is, and that's there are strategies and there's investments being made on that end. But it falls under a different bucket, or as I like to say, also like a freeway lane. It's another freeway lane. It's on the environmental impact side.
Right. Well, and also then I know we're part of that USGBC decarb committee, and it's also the whole what materials are the buildings being made out of, right? How much carbon is in that raw material, and what's happening with that as it's being manufactured? How do you manufacture those component materials with less carbon?
Yeah.
So that's a whole other part of it. That's not even the operational. So there's a lot going on, and there's a lot still to do, obviously, in this environment with climate change really on top of us, when you can see all the flooding and everything that's going on. So anything that we can do, especially the thing about this is, one, you're getting money from the utility to do it more efficiently and more low carbon, but you're also then going to have, hopefully you're going to have a better net operating income. You're going to have higher income, and when you're operating the building, so that's gotta be good for the pocketbook and the valuation of the property.
Right.
We have another question here. How is the development community being educated about these California programs? Is there a requirement that they be informed when they start to pursue entitlements? Oh, this is such a good question. That's why we're here, trying to educate everyone. You know, I think the problem is that a lot of times the architects, and no offense to architects, but they're building to the current building code. And unless somebody really says, hey, we want to build at a higher efficiency, or we want to take advantage of these incentive programs, they don't know. I know the hotel that we worked on, when we had a topping off ceremony, we were on the top of the roof there. They had like reached this certain milestone, and they had a party up there. And the architect, who was from Chicago, and even then we still got $80,000 for the hotel through the Savings by Design program. The architect said to me, well, had I known they actually wanted to build at a higher efficiency, I would have designed it from the very beginning, because they kind of hired us late. He said, I would have designed it totally differently. And I'm thinking, why did they hire us so late? But, you know, they still got money, and I'm still trying to all the COVID and everything, they don't really have proper usage, because I actually wanted to compare it against their current usage against what the energy model had said. I wanted to see how close we were to that. So I think the problem is lack of communication, or we just need to get the word out there, right? Is there another way, Mabel, that people are hearing about it?
Well, there's been a ton of money spent, but it at the end of the day, you're dealing with humans and different. So people come and go, but also what are the objectives? So what I'm about to say is that there are the state agencies, again, the California Public Utilities Commission, who direct the utilities to spend money a certain way for these incentives. So there are those entities, right, in a state. And then there's the local governments where they approve buildings. Either they're going to pass inspection or they're not going to pass inspection. Their main priority, because at the end of the day, they have limited funding and their main focus is health and safety, want to align to code. Again, how do we make sure that we have our citizens and our buildings follow the law, not necessarily take advantage of carrots. They don't feel that that's their responsibility, but there's been a lot of pilots and training, but again, like I said, people come and go. So you may have a building official or a department for one particular city that says, this is important. And at that plan check stage, they introduce incentives, but it hasn't quite stuck because it's not a core responsibility. So it ends up falling on those who conceptually understand, like the state of California cares about this and they've funded these initiatives, but who has that money, right? And it's mostly centered in the California Public Utilities Commission, and then they flow it down through the utilities. And then the most recent update for all of you to know is that historically the utilities would run the programs themselves, but utilities aren't the most innovative. They were mostly, as they say, order takers. So you needed to be aware of the programs and then ask for it. And then they would send somebody out and help you with the incentive application. That whole paradigm has shifted where, as I mentioned, the commission has told the utilities, you're not good marketers and you're not good program implementers. You must now pass this to the private sector. And the private sector are being motivated by, and this is getting into a lot of detail, the way that they get paid is based on the number of projects that they bring through the program. So they're forced to think differently, not be order takers because then they won't get paid, but go out into the communities and connect more with architects and developers, et cetera. So this is like a new approach, and we'll see how these private entities like a Willdan, like the one that I explained, who's running the new Savings by Design program, how active they will be in the community. But you now should just be more aware that, one, the services are completely changing, and even the programs that you used to know of before, their names may change, the implementer will be the same, the incentives will be different.
Yeah, and reach out to us, because we at Green Economy are all about incentives, so we like to stay on top of them, which is why we have Mabell here. Mm-hmm. Right. So, yes, we will provide this presentation to everyone who'd like it. Yes, we do that.
Recording and the presentation will be sent out after the call.
Oh, here we have another question. Is this program only for buildings or also for the complete facilities? We are working with electrical robotic lawn mowers, and the difference in energies and emissions compared to ride-on lawnmowers are significant, 95% reduction. Oh.
So our ride-on, what fuels ride-on lawnmowers? Is it propane or diesel? Or gas, I guess?
Yeah. Facilities. So it's really good. Are they? Yeah, I don't know what they use for the lawn mowers, but it's asking for, if you actually look beyond just how you built the building, but what you did in the building.
Yeah. That's a great question, because I do know of other states that have taken concepts such as, what are they called? Like, these mobile units, like let's say a lawnmower. The ones that have these that pull up pallets. What are they called? Oh my goodness! Forklifts. Oh my! I don't know why I completely blanked on that. So converting them to electric forklifts. So different utilities that I can think of in Texas and in the East have been providing very robust incentives for electric conversion of these type of units. So it's very similar to what you're saying, because the utilities want you to use more electricity, but by not using the forklifts of the past that are, from what I understand, fueled by propane or diesel, I can't quite remember, you're also not using dirty fuel. So there's like an environmental benefit, but there's also a utility benefit because you're now using their cleaner fuel. California has some of that, but I haven't heard of a full out effort on that. I imagine that no, I'm going to pause on that. I haven't heard something specific in California, but it certainly has existed in other utilities.
I'm kind of curious. So the question, the individual is working with electrical robotic lawnmowers. So basically going from the gas to electric and wondering, so it's almost more like an EV incentive. Like, are there things where you're reducing these emissions, incentives
Or
for?
a plug load. It's like a plug load because they are plugged in, or electric ones are, right?
I think the comment is right. It doesn't matter. You still have the same amount of energy usage, but rather it's the source of energy. If it's a fossil fuel, if the current equipment uses fossil fuel, let's say diesel or propane, then the state is motivated to have you not use those, but rather use one that is electric, because if you're using electric and the generation and the supply is coming from renewables, let's say, then it's a cleaner way of operating that unit than of before. Diesel ride-on mowers, yeah, the difference is emissions are big, right? So I am, you know what, Marika, I'm curious myself because I do. So for states like Texas, and I could think of Centerpoint Energy that had this forklift program. It's very similar to what you just are asking here. And then I think it was Duke Energy also had a similar program. And they're not very innovative. And so does California have those? And Marika, I'll follow up with you so that when you send out the PowerPoint, you can also include a response to this question. It's a good question because those certainly changing and motivating the market to change from existing technologies to an electric version of that is important from an environmental perspective.
And it's just little things like that, right? Different components, different pieces of equipment that are in normal life. If you just start looking at each of them and making them all electric and really not doing anything from 4 to 9 at this point in time, then unless you have a battery, really.
Yeah.
Right?
But the battery would then use, you would want to use the battery to then, so that lawnmower, let's say, gets, operates by electricity and not diesel from the past.
Right. And you could charge the battery, you could charge that lawnmower in the middle of the night, or you could charge it off a battery during the day.
Good question. And everyone, you also, please feel free to reach out to Mabell directly as well after the call for further questions.
Yeah.
We'll follow. You'll get I'm curious, so I'll follow up. The reason why I work with utilities is that all this is very niche information. Like it's very specific. So I think I have a good chance of knowing where to look to find those if those incentives exist. All this stuff is very complicated. A lot of this is there's so much money, and as you can see, policy direction is changing. It's no longer about energy reduction; it's about carbon reduction. And so the way that money is being spent and through different and through which agencies is changing.
There are though still incentives for energy reduction too, right? So there's a bunch. LADWP still has theirs, but also Wilden is putting out another program for lighting, HVAC, window film. There's a new program just got approved also, I think last week. So there is money for energy efficiency. If anyone's considering doing any kind of retrofit, please let us know. We are contractors, so we can do the work as well. But we're trade allies in that program because it's free money again. So take advantage of it. All right. Do we have any other questions? Any thoughts? All right. Well, I want to thank Mabell for joining us today. It was always great to see you. And we'll send this presentation out so everyone can have it. And then please feel free to reach out to us or Mabell with any specific questions you have now or in the future. We try and stay up on all of this.
Please reach out. I'd love to connect with all of you. Have a great day.
Excellent.
Thank you
So much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.